Radio Free Skaro!
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Radio Free Skaro, episode number 910. I am Stephen in Edmonton.
Warren in Vancouver.
And Chris in Edmonton.
Hope you...
Be better if you just said 910. Sequential.
910. Congratulations, everyone who figured out our massive ongoing joke for the Beatles payoff title for this episode. That's the height. That's the height of comedy and planning that you'll get from this podcast.
Oh boys.
Yeah. What it also did is it prevented us from having to think up titles for 15 minutes after each recording for 2 months straight. So we have one for next month already. Next week, I should say. But after that, oh man, we're gonna get used to making new titles for the episodes. It's gonna be tough.
I'm sure we'll manage.
Yeah, maybe.
We've done it once or twice after all.
912. I'm just thinking of different Porsche models, like the 914 was probably my favorite, oddly enough. There's the 928, 911, of course. Other car aficionados out there, I'm sure, could probably think of different Porsche numbers.
I know none of these things.
No.
Although I did see a trailer for the Gran Turismo movie. I'm like, really? We're doing this now? Okay.
Gran Turismo. Is that based on the video game, or what is that?
Yep. Directed by Vancouver's own Neil Blomkamp. Otherwise known as one really great movie and two other crappy ones.
I didn't know he was from I thought he was South African born and bred.
He is, but he's lived in Vancouver forever.
Oh.
That's kind of anticlimactic then.
Yeah.
Oh,
Is there gonna be some weird? It's funny. I saw Chappie in the theaters. Remember Chappie? And it was a movie about that.
Not good.
No, it was a movie about that weird robot guy. And we were in Jasper, Alberta in the mountains. And we went to go see it. And a father and his son were ahead of us in line. The kid thought it was.
And it's pretty violent, right?
The kid thought it was this movie. The dad thought it was a movie for kids. It's like, oh, it's a little robot, talking to robot. 2 to see Chappie, please. I'm sorry, it's rated 18 plus. You can't take your child in there. Oh, yeah, it was very violent and bloody.
Well, I was just thinking about Neil Blomkamp. Like or hate his movies, you can't say he's the worst South African to move to Canada. Because I can think of another one who's way worse and who runs a certain social media site.
Did he move to Canada?
Briefly for school, yeah. And then he went to the States.
God, why did he do that? Why did he have to disgrace us? God, that's just embarrassing for all involved. Anyway, on this episode of the podcast, Gav Rymill from Terra Nation Army, Dalek 6388, Season 3 of Terra Nation Army has just started over on the popular YouTube channel where you can find a bunch of crap, but you can find some really cool stuff, and Terra Nation Army is one of them. And so we take a deep dive into the new Asylum of the Daleks video that they've put together. There are more to come. I watched a whole bunch of... not draft one, like early pre-release copies of it last night before talking to Gav this morning. And they were really great, and I'm looking forward to them coming out so you can all see them too. But we talk about that later on in this here podcast. But first, the news. Bonnie Langford, folks. Bonnie Langford as Melanie Bush is returning to Doctor Who, full on, not a cameo, not like a little drop-in cameo like she did in The Power of the Doctor. Full on episode, at least, with Ncuti Gatwa in the upcoming series. How about that? Bonnie Langford. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
Well, to paraphrase Marge Simpson, I just think that's neat.
Right? I do too. Chris, what about you? Happy about this news?
Yeah, I haven't even thought about it, to be honest. Like, it came out the other day, and it's like, oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I have not really thought about it since.
Well,
that's not bad. That's not good. It's just I just haven't had time.
Yeah, Bonnie Langford's charming. I interviewed her at Gallifrey 1, and she was great.
And she fits in your pocket.
She's tiny. She has a little dog, and the little dog is on her phone wallpaper. And I asked about the dog before we had a talk because I always ask people about their dogs. You know what? I feel like this whole return of Russell T Davies is kind of like Ian Levine's monkey paw wish. It's like, like, wow, Russell T Davies is returning. Finally, we're getting proper Doctor Who again. And then basically, like, Jake spawned soon, and it's gone completely camp a little bit. And now Bonnie Langford, like Bonnie Langford was the last straw for Ian Levine back.
I was going to ask him what his opinion was
back in 1986, and I don't know what he thinks of it now. Maybe he's mellowed since then. But yeah, he did not like the casting of Bonnie Langford, who I thought was perfectly great as Mel in the 80s. So
she was kind of shortchanged. Like she pops in out of nowhere and you don't really get much of an explanation. And you're like, here you go, Bonnie Langford, work with this. And so it wasn't really a fair, what's the word I'm looking for here? She wasn't given a level playing field to begin with. And so it's kind of nice to have her back. Right. So,
yeah. I mean, Russell T Davies on his Instagram feed said something about, like what happened to Sabalom Glitz? Why is she back on Earth?
How did she get back to Earth? Yeah.
A saddle up cowboy or something. He used the term cowboy, and everyone was like trying to read into like every single little.
You know what this means?
Every little
in a cowboy outfit. I can't wait.
Well, no, he's not wearing a cowboy outfit. I know. He was on set today. Today, as we record this Friday, June 9th. AKA Indictment Day, AKA Boris Johnson stepped down. It's a good day, everyone. So hopefully this good feeling is still carrying through on Sunday by the time this thing comes out. But yeah, they announce these casting things whenever they're about to go out on location, so so they can spill their own news as opposed to having people leak it out to the internet. And Ncuti Gatwa was on set there, and some people were saying, is this a new outfit or is this just what he's wearing? And
I thought that too. I'm like, I think it's just what he's wearing. But I reiterate the fact I would like to see him in a cowboy outfit, which we might see in the Barbie movie. Who knows?
Yeah. To be fair, I thought when I saw first shots of Christopher Eccleston on set, I thought that was just what he's wearing. Because, I was expecting some foppish attire, and it wasn't. That was his actual costume. So,
I mean, you could arguably say that about Tennant, too.
Yes. Although we saw the costume before we ever went on.
I know. I'm just saying in terms of costumes, just man in the street type costuming.
Yeah. In retrospect, it's kind of interesting that they never actually said, here's the new Doctor and here's what he's wearing. We sort of found out through set photos what he was going to be wearing, Christopher Eccleston. Didn't know what they were doing back then, I suppose. But anyway, Bonnie Langford, very thrilled to be back on Doctor Who. I wonder how long this has been in the works for. I wonder when this happened. I wonder if, if she knew anything at Gallifrey 1, she wouldn't let it on, I'll tell you that much right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no hint or indication back then.
Nope.
What I find funny, and I've just invented this in my head, is that there's going to be a whole bunch of people disappointed, and they're like, well, I thought that RTD hated Chibnall because I made that up. And this doesn't prove my point. Right. Here's an 18-hour YouTube video about how angry I am.
The fall of Doctor Who. Yeah, no. Yeah, I like, you know what? Maybe Russell T Davies saw the end of that. So, you know what? Let's bring Mel back. Why not? Let's bring Bonnie Langford back after watching Power of the Doctor, which I think is kind of cool. So,
we're not talking about the rumors about how she's returning, are we?
No, because I don't know
no
them.
idea what those are.
And I don't want to spill them for people who want to avoid them. So we'll steer well clear of that.
Forget I said anything.
Yeah. So there's rumors out there, kids. Forget about what you thought. We'll probably ask Chris after we're done recording, but not now. Not now.
You already know because I sent them to you. Doesn't mean you remember.
Well, sending it to us and us reading them because we're trying to avoid spoilers is an entirely different matter. But
that's true.
Yeah. Still waiting on word, by the way, if Doctor Who's going to come to San Diego Comic-Con. I honestly don't know if it's going to happen. Just because not just Doctor Who, just like in general. There's a lot of labor unrest in the entertainment industry these days, with the Screen Actors Guild voting to potentially strike come June 30th, and the writers, of course, still out on strike. The directors settled and stuff, but I don't know. I just feel like it's a weird atmosphere to come. Hey, let's all go party in San Diego and promote a new thing.
Actors promoting something which is essentially on behalf of studio while on strike seems pretty unlikely. And people are, I mean, I would, and you would, and Chris would go to a panel that was nothing but writers or whatever whatever, but most people wouldn't. So
No.
why bother, right? In fact, yeah, this might really not be very good for San Diego Comic-Con in general.
No. I mean, for a good cause. I mean, pay your writers, damn it. Yeah. So I'm holding out hope. I haven't put any money down or anything like that on flying to San Diego. But if the moment happens, I will be there. I will be there. San Diego Comic-Con in July, which is next month. Maybe to see Bonnie Langford. Maybe Bonnie Langford will be the sole representative there because everyone else is on strike. And so Bonnie Langford has to present the trailer and everything else of this new series that she's in. She won't be there.
And for other movies. Hey, you seen Oppenheimer? Here's Bonnie Langford to present the trailer.
It's true. Look at this. It's the Marvels, everyone. I'm Bonnie Langford. I do not play any part in this, but the Marvels.
Hardest working woman in show business.
Yeah.
At our behest, apparently.
I think she could do it. She could just be.
She is anyway. She's like she's got. That's the thing. But when she went on Doctor Who, she already had like a pretty stellar dancing career, I think.
Yeah,
and then past that, she's been working the whole time too. So.
Whole time. She's never been out of work. Bonnie Langford, never been out of work. We're lucky to have her. Kids, Doomsday is underway. You can read the first hour of Doomsday and a story written by James Goss. It's on the actual BBC website. You can read it. Hour 1. It's reading. You know me. I'm illiterate. I cannot read, so I have not read it. But it's all there. And the comic book version, A Doctor in the House, that's a question mark. Part 1, which is hour 6 to 7, is available for pre-order. It comes out July the 5th. So there we go. Doomsday is officially underway. The Twitterverse is overcome with emotion and furore about the beginning of
definitely
Doomsday.
Furore, yeah.
Beginning of Doomsday, but it's all there if you want. So there, Doomsday. You know what else is out? Doctor Who Chronicles 1963 to 64. That's the little bookazine that comes out that they focus on a year of Doctor Who, and this one is sort of tied like 13 months because 63 to 64 because Doctor Who, of course, premiered in November of 1963. And I just took a skim through it, and it looks great. Jonathan Helm, aka WhoFX, writes 3 articles in there about they have like talk about special effects. There's an article about number of lines and resolution of TV. Thinking, oh boy, this is a targeted attack towards me.
Catnip.
So, yep. So I am happy I picked this sucker up. So yeah, links to the show notes. You can pick a version up for yourself as well. All about the earliest days of Doctor Who. So there. And one last thing, we're just ripping through the news today. We're recording this on a Friday night, kids, just so you know, Friday night. Because it's the only time we could get time to record. So we're all staving off sleep. But this is a cool looking book coming out in November of this calendar year. It's called Whotopia, The Ultimate Guide to the Universe. The Whoniverse.
Come on, get it right.
Co-written by Simon Guerrier, Una McCormack, and Jonathan Morris. 3 top-notch people and top-notch Doctor Who people as well. All with a bunch of stories and everything else, and probably some graphs in there and everything because Simon Gary's involved and he likes all that sort of nerdy details and stuff. So yeah, this thing rocketed to the top of my list for when it comes out in November. Maybe it'll be on my Christmas list if I can wait past November 16th to get it. But yeah, very much looking forward to this. Links in the show notes for you to pre-order your copy now. And on that note, it's time to talk to Gav Rymill of Terry Nation Army fame, where we talk all about the videos that they put out on YouTube and what goes into making them. It's a fascinating and fun chat. Please enjoy my chat with Gav Rymill. The 3rd season of the wonderful YouTube series Terry Nation Army has started with the first of a 3-part massive deep dive into what Daleks showed up in 2012's Asylum of the Daleks, with further episodes ranging from topics like the Wheel in Space to Jack the Ripper to follow. I'm joined by one half of the team at Daleks 6388 who makes these superb videos. It's Gav Rymill. Hello, Gav.
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Listen, well, so some background info on this. You messaged me in January about first wanting to promote thinking the Asylum video was right around the corner. We're recording this in June, so obviously this video and this season has been a long time in the making.
Yeah, well, it was meant to be the Christmas special. So I'd missed it slightly by January, and I've missed it slightly more by June. So I'm not holding out for next Christmas. It's just it's a summer special. It's not a special. It's just happening.
Right. Well, I mean, so the first part of the Asylum of the Daleks, I'm a patron, so I've seen drafts of these. I have to admit, sometimes the drafts come in via the emails and stuff, and I go, do I want to watch this, or do I want to be surprised and watch the final product? And it's amazing how much these change in between drafts to the actual final version of it. So the Asylum one is going to be 3 parts by the looks of it.
Yeah, it was originally a single episode. It seemed a really logical, discrete package to say, let's do an episode that just outlines every prop used in the Asylum, whether it's one the BBC had already, whether it's a bronze one the BBC borrowed in, or whether it's one of the 7 classic props, because as we know, it featured every Dalek ever. And when it got to a runtime of 55 minutes, and I still had a fair chunk of stuff that I was leaving out, I thought, it's not really on brand for me to be leaving stuff out. It goes against my nature to say, oh, I've put too much interesting information in this. I need to make it less detailed. So I thought, fine, I'll just break it up how I can. And the three most logical splits, or at least I thought at the time, were to do the classic props in one video. And then there are some other borrowed props that are not classic props. Mm-hmm. So they will be in the next installment. And then the third one is about the Daleks that the BBC actually owned by that point. So I'm hesitant to call the third one even an Asylum episode, but fundamentally it is because they built a lot of new props for the Asylum. But we're trying to sort of track as well the original bronze Daleks that were built in 2005. So I'm cautious about putting any hint on the branding that it's episodes 2 and 3, because historically YouTube, whether it's the algorithms or the viewers, nobody likes part 2s of anything. So I'm not going to label it as part 2. It'll just be another investigation that treads a lot the same ground.
It'll be The Mysterious Planet and Mind Warp as opposed to The Trial of a Time Lord.
Exactly, yeah.
Did you know the kind of assignment you were in for when you started thinking, hey, let's just look at the history of all the props in Asylum of the Daleks that became this months-long obsession?
We'd done the bulk of it quite a few years ago for the website, so most of it had been sort of nailed down in terms of the bronze props. Weirdly, that was easier because there was a limited number of places that perfect looking bronze props come from, and imperfect looking bronze props, with the greatest respect to prop builders, myself included, it's really difficult unless you've got access to the original molds or a recast of the original molds. Things like the slats and the shoulder section and even the shape of the dome is going to be slightly different to a BBC Dalek. Mm. So the BBC bronze Daleks were actually fairly easy to pin down, weirdly, even though they all look fairly identical. And then the classic Daleks that we thought should be relatively straightforward has turned out to be some tricky stuff. I'm still not 100% certain where the Death Dalek, how it sort of connects up. There's a little gap in its story missing, because we worked out that it's advertised on the This Planet Earth website, mm-hmm. and we worked out that it ends up in the Doctor Who experience. But I could never find out whether it was bought by the BBC for the experience or it was bought for the asylum, which if it was, then that would be unique. So there's, as with all bits of Dalek prop history, there's always still mysteries. And it doesn't seem to matter whether it's a Dalek story that was made a year or two ago or one made in 1963. There are questions, unanswered questions. And don't even get John started on the unanswered questions in the Chris Chibnall era, because there is no information out there about anything.
Well, fortunately, there are no real stories that feature every single Dalek in existence for you to have to try to comb through. I hope this isn't a spoiler to talk about, but just I was fascinated by, you looking back at Dalek props from the 60s and stuff and seeing the various inconsistencies of prop making then. And it's fascinating to see the making of the new bronze Daleks, some of them very new, some of them made for Asylum of the Daleks. And even then, there were like little mistakes, like little things being put on upside down, which is invaluable for you when you're trying to identify props. Yeah. But are you surprised that such things still happen in this day and age?
Well, yes and no. I mean, you would hope that somebody would take a step back and see a big glaring error like a slap being upside down. But in my professional life, I have made plenty of big glaring errors that no amount of staring at ever alerted me to. So I sympathize with anyone whose work is being scrutinized at this level of detail, and also the speed at which they were having to build these props. And I think I'm right in saying that the prop builders for Asylum didn't have any molds to work from, so they would have had to make molds from one of the existing props. I think I'm right in saying that, because there were molds built by obviously Mike Tucker and his team originally, the model unit, and then there were molds. The original Dalek was remolded, and new bits were cast by a company called Specialist Models for all the later Daleks, or 2, 3, 4, 5 onwards. So that when it came to Asylum, I presume they didn't have access to the Specialist Models mold. So again, I presume they will have taken brand new molds from one of the existing props. So not only are they building the Daleks, they're having to tool themselves up to start the building process. So if you go to someone who's built a Dalek before and say, please build me a second one, that's very easy. Relatively easy. If you go to someone who's never built a Dalek before and say, build me a Dalek, that is an absolute nightmare. So you've either got to copy a prop that's already been made, and historically that's what's happened, or you start from scratch, which I would say was not impossible, but the geometry of the bronze shoulders, for example, is really weird and difficult, and I've modelled it in 3D, and it's tricky. It's confusing. So Penny Howarth and her team would have had to, I assume, make new molds, cast new fiberglass sections. So you think of just the sheer number of hemispheres per skirt, and they're making 8 Daleks, and then the slats around the shoulders. And for every slat, they've got to finish them, sand them, paint them, bolt them on, and there's over a dozen slats per Dalek, and they're just under a lot of pressure to get this done. It's probably not surprising that somewhere along the way an object gets installed 180 degrees to the direction that it should be. And it takes an irritant like me to come along and say, oh, you've done that wrong.
but as I alluded
That's
to,
my normal voice.
Yeah, it's much different than your radio voice. It's it's helped you a great deal. Every single little imperfection. It's fascinating to watch you in the videos, sort of like, okay, where do we identify this, and like literally cycling through hundreds of different photos to try to find the matching one with the matching icon on the dome and everything. Like, how much of an effort is it to research all of that?
Well, it's huge. It's huge, but it's addictive as well. So once you find a little something, a little crack in the mystery, and you can just start to widen that crack. It's really exciting, and I used to do a lot of family history, genealogy, and it's the same kind of thing of like, I need to go to bed, but I've just noticed this, so I will just check that, and then it's 3 a.m. And yeah, it is a lot of work, but it's a hobby, and there's two of us, and it really helps that I can throw things at John and he can throw things at me, and we spend a lot of the time playing devil's advocate. He will send me a picture and say, I think I've seen something here. What do you think? And hopefully I come to the same conclusion. In terms of the details, it's really nice when, like you say, when something big and unfortunate crops up. What's nice is when you're looking at two near identical Daleks and you notice maybe a tiny scratch on one panel, and then you find a different photo where you can just make out the same scratch, but the second photo also shows you some whacking great identification feature that's really easy to spot everywhere else, because it's just a much simpler if we can find a big breadcrumb to follow.
Mm-hmm. Obviously I enjoy these videos, and I think a lot of people do as well. But this is very specific information, but it's very entertainingly put together. That's the great thing about these videos. Where do you draw the line to sort of go like, there's a lot of information here, or not sort of draw the line, I suppose, but like, how do you sort of like work to present this in a believable and entertaining package? I'll allude to Graham Allen's music score, which is almost like throughout the entire thing, and it really helps things move along and stuff. But he's part of it. But how do you make an entertaining package with very specific nerd info like this?
A lot of redrafting.
Right.
You're quite right. Graham's a huge part of the creative process. I tend to put his music in as early as I can during the edit, which makes the editing harder. But it is really important because it sort of it generates the sense of impetus and kind of the tone and direction. But also sometimes I can see where he's put a little musical flourish in, and it's somewhere near me making quite an important point. So I think, well, if I can just slightly rejig my dialogue, or maybe, and I'm sure he hates me for this, change the speed of his music to like 105%, so that it just aligns perfectly, and then I'll make a hilarious comment, and his music will make a little ta-da at the end of it. So that kind of thing is what eats up the time. If it was a case of just writing down the facts and putting together the slideshow and hoping it made sense, we really could churn these out. But myself and Rhys Williams, who helps us a lot and is a great extra pair of eyes, and is very, very good analyst and editor, content editor rather than video editor, although we'll see where that goes. But he's got the same eye for detail as me, Rhys. So if I watch something and I think, after that sentence, I've left 2.5 seconds before the next sentence, should it be 3 seconds? I'll show Rhys, and he will usually come back and say, I think you could do with an extra 0.5 second after that sentence. And I'm like, damn it, I knew it. And it's frustrating in a way to look back at some of the early videos where I didn't go through such a rigorous redrafting process. And there's some really big discoveries that we made that I just don't give them any time to breathe in the episode. So I'll make a really significant point and then just very hastily move on. And I learned after enough videos to often over-explain things, because normally I'm taking for granted the information that people are bringing along in their own minds. Explain everything up to a point, not assume that everyone has seen every Dalek story, but also don't get bogged down in the detail. Try and strike a balance. And if there's a really significant nugget of information, make that land nicely, build up to it, set it up, explain why it's important, and then hopefully, with probably an unnecessary sense of triumph, say, and this is the very Dalek, and hopefully gives it more of a sense of storytelling than I was able to achieve with some of the earlier edits. But also just kind of going back in and adding stupid bits in and taking them out as well. There's been a lot of times I've put things in I thought were hilarious on my first couple of drafts, and then when I've been watching it in the cold light of day, I thought that either doesn't make any sense or isn't funny or is just extremely overindulgent. And sometimes I put things in and wait for John to tell me to take them out, and he doesn't, so they stay.
Well, I mean, you're obviously very particular about the information stuff. At what point do you sort of say, okay, it's done, it must go out to the world now? Because, you know, judging by the sounds of it, you could go back and redo episodes as well. Like, when do you decide that's it, we're done this episode?
When I get really sick of it, and I can't face rewatching the same 25 minutes of my voice talking about these same things for the 400th time.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess there's a critical point at which it sort of counterbalances of the need to deliver a good video and the need to keep my own sanity. The amount of facts, or the number of facts left to include, dwindles to the point where when I review a video, or when John and I review a video for the final time, and something crops up, which it inevitably does, and it has just done, I don't know how I missed it, but watching the Asylum episode 1, where we're talking about Russell T Davis's Dalek being built, and we've got a picture of the Dalek being handed over, and then we talk about it going into his garden and being dilapidated.
Mm-hmm.
And after draft 27, I watched it and I thought, we've got all the info on the guys who built this Dalek. We've got quotes from them about how they built, how they came to be commissioned to build it, how they were put in touch with Russell, and some of the material. And I'm like, what? Why isn't it in the? What am I doing? And I said to John, what do I do? I can't cope. This video needs to go out this week. I'm losing my mind. And he said, could we do it with a caption? And I thought, I'd kind of rather leave it out than signpost the fact that I have left it out.
Right.
Just have a big paragraph of text flashing up on the screen saying, here's all the things that I forgot.
Right.
And I said, we'll just leave it. But John, rather brilliantly, is doing little YouTube shorts.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that would be quite a nice opportunity to pick up some dropped info. So he's going to do a little YouTube short as a kind of mini follow-up on the stuff about Russell's Dalek that I omitted. But generally, I try to get everything in a video that I can find out in reasonable time, which is part of the reason this has taken so long, because, as always, I kept finding out new stuff, particularly about Andrew Beach's Silver and Blue Daleks, because I had a reasonable idea of where they came from, and I'm friends with Steve Allen, so I knew that he and his friends had built them. But then I was getting dropped little extra pieces of information. James Johnson, the Pridonian on Twitter, he just popped up and said, "Did you know this Dalek is on the cover of Jubilee?" And that blew my mind. And then I looked at the Doctor Who magazine cover that accompanied it, and just all of this stuff came out of the woodwork. And then I was just trawling for convention pictures, trying to find where one was, because there's originally one of Andrew Beach's 1960s Dalek, and then a second one suddenly appears on the scene. So I was really keen to try to drill down when that first pops up, and obfuscated slightly the fact that I couldn't And there's also a picture, because you're possibly thinking, why don't you just ask people like Andrew Beach and Steve Allen? Well, I do.
I was going to reference that, yeah.
I do, and they often don't know, or their memories contradict the photos that I've got. So Steve, who's brilliant, and he's so helpful, and he's so patient with all my stupid questions, I asked him about these Andrew Beach Daleks, and he said, oh yes, we built that one, and we built this one. And I've got this picture of the day we finished building it, and that's my son next to it. And I said, that's nice. How old's your son in that picture? And he said, 7, I think, maybe 8.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, right. I've got pictures of that Dalek 7 years before that. So that is not the day that Dalek was built, because your son wasn't born when you built that Dalek. And he's like, no, that can't be right. I'm sorry, it is. I don't know. So Steve and I had a lot of lengthy conversations about the colour of the gate in his backyard. I was looking on Google Earth to try to see if I could see when his gate changed colour.
Oh my God.
And ultimately, we cannot explain the photo of his son and that Dalek, because he says he never had that Dalek back in his yard. So there's no reason it should be there 7, 8 years after it was built. So again, mystery upon mystery. You think go to the primary source, go to the man who built it. He will open his folder full of Dalek photos and show you every clipping that he can to nail down the dates. No, absolutely not. He says, I found this in a drawer and I'm sure it's from 2002. I'm like, no, it's not. So
you have to convince him that his own memory of his own history is wrong.
Yeah. And this is it. And this has been true since the start. Like I've said before, when John and I first sat down to try and put all this together, there were prop histories already out there, and there was brilliant work done by a great many people. But a lot of it was based on what people had said, anecdotal information. And we became a little bit cynical about it. And we said, okay, let's just use photos, because the DVDs had come out. So we were lucky that previous prop historians weren't. They had the VHS if they were lucky. And we were getting all of the nicely restored DVDs, which had all this extra detail. We got a load of photos. And yes, unfortunately, able to disprove a lot of quote-unquote facts that had come from people on the show. So yeah, sadly, you just have to discount the memories of some people, including Steve Allen. Sorry, Steve.
You allude to it a couple times in the Asylum video, and I don't mean to create any extra work for you, but I feel like it's already on the agenda. But you allude to the Dalek nightmare that is the Magician's Apprentice, the Witch's Familiar. Is that is the history of all those Daleks props? Is that also going to be the subject of a future video?
Yeah, I don't know how many videos that'll be.
That'll be season 4, all of it, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's always interesting. What you want is to be able to tell a clear story about a single prop. Even, there is no such thing, because they all get swapped around and they get refurbished and stuff. But if you can kind of strip it down to the bare detail, or the sort of the shell of the Dalek, and tell the story of one prop living its television career, then I think those are the best types of video. So things like The Magician's Apprentice, it really complicates it when you've got a Dalek like the Special Weapons Dalek is in The Magician's Apprentice. It's not the original Special Weapons Dalek that was in the previous new series story. So that's fine. But then you've also got silver and blue Daleks belonging to Andrew Beach, which look like the ones that were in the Asylum, but they're not. So there's no continuity through some of these stories, which I think is a bit unsatisfying to the viewer, to just be told this is a new prop turned up in this story and you never see it again. The end.
Right.
What I like is being able to throw forward and look backwards and say, look at all the stuff this Dalek did before it turned up on TV, and then guess what? It ends up exterminating Jimmy Carr, for example.
Right.
So, yeah, The Magician's Apprentice, there's a lot going on. It's got a Renegade Dalek in, which again is not the same Renegade Dalek as the one in the Asylum. So it looks like, on face value, if you lined all the props, if you lined up photos in sequence, it looks like at least half a dozen Daleks were taken from the Asylum, cleaned up, and they go into Magician's Apprentice. And it's not the case. They are half a dozen very similar looking props, which leads, I think, to a quite a satisfying thing. One of the things I do want to cover in The Magician's Apprentice are the I hesitate to say models, the toys, because there's a couple of shots where they use they're about foot tall remote control Daleks, and you see those in the corridors of Skaro.
Mm-hmm.
The fun thing there is that they seem to have pieced a couple of props together from different toys. So there's a 60s Dalek with a new series fender on it, and there's a Dalek with a black dome as well. So there's some swapping around. So there's interesting stuff going on in Magician's Apprentice. Not all of it is deliberate, but the toys is another interesting subject because they get used very effectively in Day of the Doctor and Into the Dalek as well.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, that model shot, the miniature of the Dalek control room, had me fooled. Not for very long, but it's really, really well done. And I couldn't work out what I was looking at. Initially, I thought it was really good CGI, and then I started to fix on the details, and I thought, hang on, this Dalek control room is about 3 feet wide.
I didn't know that. Wow, I've learned something. Wow.
Go and have a look. Once you spot it, it's like the details, like the eye discs and things like that are thicker because they're small plastic parts.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's really well done. And there's a shot where the squad of Daleks is coming down the corridor, and that's a model as well. And one of the things that gives it away is it I don't know if you ever had one of these about foot-high Daleks, but when you make them go forwards, the dome rotates randomly and the eye moves up and down randomly.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch that scene of the Daleks coming down the corridor, their heads are all performing the same maneuvers that the toys were notorious for. So that's one of the few giveaways, really. I think it's very nicely shot and better than some slightly dodgy CGI.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I'm coming to that. I'm doing a big giant pilgrimage leading up to the 60th, and so when that one comes up, I will be very much looking forward to watching that with fine detail, and I feel like I've already absorbed a whole bunch of detail about Asylum of the Daleks when that one comes around. But the channel isn't all Daleks all the time, though. I mean, you've done some sort of non-Dalek episodes in the past, but upcoming this season are a couple. There's one about the wheel in space. What a curious episode to focus on. What made you decide to do an episode on the wheel in space?
Well, what tends to happen is I have a logical starting point, or at least a sensible reason for my starting point.
Mm-hmm.
And in this instance, I've always wanted to do a video about the costumes, the original wheel costumes. So initially, there were costumes made that were more like the moon base. They were one piece, kind of baggy, custom made, and they had junction boxes and rods down their arm and new helmets. They were used for the pre-filming sequences, and then they decided that they just weren't working, so they scrapped the new suits and they replaced them with wetsuits. They took some of the junction boxes off because they kept breaking during the filming sequences. And then all of the publicity photos were taken in studio, so they have the wetsuit version. And the only surviving glimpses we have of the original wheel costumes is in the film sequences. So you can see them as they are coming towards the airlock doors in episode 6 when they are spacewalking, flapping their arms around.
Yeah.
And I've documented this before on my old website, and I did a feature for Doctor Who magazine, and I always just fancied doing a video about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been asked, a part of the reason is because people have said, do you think you'll ever do a video about the Cybermen? And I thought, yeah, that's a perfectly reasonable question. Let's do that. So as I always do, I overwrote everything. So I started writing an introduction. I was trying to sort of contextualize the time in which The Wheel in Space was written, just as a little background detail. And then after I'd written 20 minutes of introduction about the space race and the wheel design of Space Station, because it's all stuff that interests me. I'm very interested in astronomy. Mm-hmm. I thought this can't obviously go in the episode about costumes anymore. So it's either going in the bin or it's a video in its own right. And I thought, I'm sure John will indulge me. He always indulges me. So I said, look, I've accidentally written a 20-minute video about why the space station in this Cyberman story is wheel-shaped. Is that okay? And he says yes. So, but again, it's one of those things, when you start delving into it, it's a rabbit hole that gets more and more intriguing and interesting. And then you're looking at the dates of certain things being done and the decisions being made and the other things that are in the public consciousness at the time. So without wanting to give a great deal away, although it's not rocket science to coin a phrase, but the film 2001, mm-hmm. It wasn't out, but it was being made when The Wheel in Space was being made, and they 2001 and The Wheel in Space hit screens virtually at the same time. Now, obviously, we can't say that the production team had seen the film and therefore made The Wheel in Space as a reaction to 2001, but 2001 was taking influences from other things at the time. There had just been a pioneering Russian film which had shown a wheel-shaped space station, even with the curved floors, which Stanley Kubrick does. I got into everything. Like I found the equation that determines how fast a space wheel will spin to create 1G.
Yeah,
it was just a ridiculous thing to do. But it interested me, and also just as a little coincidental thing. When I was working on it, it's now quite out of date, the James Webb Space Telescope had just been launched, and that is parked in a very specific way. And I came up with a theory that the Wheel in Space shares the same orbital dynamics as the James Webb Space Telescope. So had I got the video out a year ago, whenever it was, that would have been a nice tie-in. So currently the James Webb section has been chopped out, but I might put it back in. But yeah, it is an indulgence, and I don't have high hopes for its viewing figures. But it scratched an itch, and it led to some really nice little connections, like looking into the artwork that's on the Target book, which shows a very unusual design of the wheel, and just all kinds of other things it ties into. Disney did a documentary about space wheels, and it's nice to sort of drill into a particular topic, a sort of cultural history topic. Mm-hmm. But whether or not Doctor Who fans will care for it, we'll see.
Oh, we will. I know I do.
Thanks.
Another. I mean, this sort of ties in with the last season where you did a location scouting trip for Talons of Weng Chiang and how that all changed. There's very much a departure coming up where you do basically a documentary on Jack the Ripper and how it ties in with Doctor Who.
Yeah. Again, thanks, John. He's very patient, but I read a lot about Jack the Ripper and the Whitechapel murders, and I recently read The Five, which I would highly recommend, mm-hmm. and a few others. And just as I was going over some of the details, little connections started to come together in my head, because I was thinking, like, everyone always talks about how Talons of Weng-Chiang is Phantom of the Opera, and it's Fu Manchu and it's Sherlock Holmes. And that's not to say that people don't acknowledge the link to Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper's even mentioned in Talons. I'm not breaking new ground here. But the more I thought about the things that Robert Holmes would have seen and read, the more I thought there's an awful lot of influence of the Whitechapel murders in the tone of Talons of Weng-Chiang, and some of the set pieces, and also even a couple of the names of characters Robert Holmes has picked. Some of it may be coincidence, but I think the majority of it isn't. Because there was a big resurgence in the interest in the Ripper in the 60s and 70s. It was a real thing, obviously, but then there was a sort of lull whilst it sort of morphed from reality, a dreadful series of crimes, into the stuff of legend and fiction and fictionalized versions. So when filmmakers started doing their versions of Jack the Ripper, it was with enough distance that it wasn't completely distasteful to an audience. Obviously, people at the time, they were lapping it up from a sensationalist point of view. The tabloid newspapers were booming as a result of Jack the Ripper, but they were also living it, and they knew the reality of it. And, it was a mixture of terror and dread and intrigue. So with the distance of 20, 30, 40, 50 years, when Hammer Horror did their version, and Sherlock Holmes meets Jack the Ripper, and all these kinds of interpretations and solutions being presented, and then you get all the conspiracies start to emerge in the mid-20th century, things like the Freemasons and the Royal Doctor and all this nonsense. They become very popular. And so now most people's knowledge and understanding is informed by fictionalized versions rather than the factual versions. So I kind of wanted to just do a bit more about the reality of the Ripper crimes and how that fed into stuff that ended up in Talons of Weng-Chiang. The original version of it was somewhat more a Jack the Ripper, not investigation, but it was weighted more towards me talking about the Whitechapel crimes than me talking about how it ties into Talons. And then I had a word with myself and took a lot of it out because I can waffle on. I don't know if you noticed.
It's all interesting, though. It's all interesting. That's the thing. But you have to sort of focus it on the Doctor Who element, which I think I've seen both versions of it now. I think, and the second one really ties in with, there are fascinating. I hadn't picked up on a lot of the tie-ins to the historic case of the Whitechapel murders and how they are into Doctor Who. And when you watch that in context, it's just like, everyone sort of has a go at Talons now because of the yellow face and the racist elements of it that have aged quite poorly. But it is a shocking episode when you think about how it refers to these awful murders, and this is in a family sci-fi TV show in 1977.
And I say in the introduction to this video that, I mean, even Sherlock Holmes, I'm pretty sure he never comes across a serial killer, because it was a unknown kind of concept, really, in the modern sense. But to the idea of Doctor Who, Tom Baker's Doctor Who Tea Time Adventure serial, investigating a serial murderer, which is essentially what we've got. But of course, in true Doctor Who fashion, the motives are less psychotic than just your standard serial killer, if that's not too distasteful comment. But yeah, I mean, Robert Holmes does all this interesting stuff, like, because the murderer or the murders are done in Greel's distillation chamber, there is no none of the sort of visceral horror that you get in the Whitechapel crimes. So in order to then satisfy that element, Robert Holmes, clearly feeling that a kids' TV show needed some decent blood and gore, he introduces the giant rats. So they come and chew up the bodies, which then leads you to the scene in the mortuary where they are looking at this, presumably, in one's mind's eye, horrifying thing, as the coroners and police officers in 1888 were looking at the horrors because of Jack the Ripper. So Robert Holmes has found a way to crowbar in a completely unnecessary element of mutilation of the human form into this children's program. So it's really interesting. Well, it is for me anyway, and hopefully I will infect people a little bit with my enthusiasm for this pretty grim topic.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna. It's not branded as Terry Nation Army. It's just it's just a thing. I've just got a title card that says Jack the Ripper and Doctor Who. So, but yes, it'll go out on the Dalek 6388 channel. But I kind of think it doesn't really matter what branding I put on them. I mean, people will either click on the thumbnails and hear my voice, or they won't.
If Doctor Who can wildly veer from a sand miner in space to Whitechapel murders in the space of a couple weeks, I'm sure that it's people will say, "Hey, we could do all sorts of things on this YouTube channel."
Yes.
Well, it's as always, Gav. It's superb. One perk about this podcast is that I get to reach out and talk to people about things that I like, who make Doctor Who and stuff. And these are some of my favorite videos out there.
Thank you.
Especially with I mean, the VAM on the Blu-rays are great. But the modern series doesn't have as much, and so this is like become my new value-added material obsession. Watching these videos, you put quite a lot of care into them. Obviously, you and John both, and the entire team, and it's commendable. So I urge everyone to check it all out. Terra Nation Army, Dalek 6388 on YouTube. Links in the show notes. Gav, continued success. I look forward to all your future work in the weeks and months to come.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gavin. I hadn't been on the show, Gav, for a couple years at least, because season 2 came and went without us talking about it here. So season 2 was great. Season 3 is looking to be really great of Terra Nation Army, which is really good stuff. It's amazing. I've said it before. It's amazing how fan-made stuff on YouTube for Doctor Who is better than actual documentary stuff for other sci-fi franchises. It's like the deep dive nature of it is and told in an entertaining and educational way. It's really good stuff. So I urge you to check it out if you haven't checked it out already. Anyway, last bit of the podcast, folks. You know what time it is? It's the waning days of the Timelash, kids, where we look back at this week in Doctor Who history. I'm trying to remember. We very briefly might have touched on Kit Pedler, who, because he's involved in the Wheel in Space, he was born June 11th, 1927. He co-created the Cybermen and provided the ideas for the war machines and other things like that. Pretty important person in Doctor Who history is one Kit Pedler. But he's dead now, so he can't...
Yep, and for a long time since.
Yeah, he died in 1981.
Born amidst flappers and mad stock trading.
Yep, and died before the Falklands War happened. So I think he died in 1981. I think I'm right. I think I'm right in saying that. As I click the bio, look at that, May 27th, 81. Yep. Can't get that.
Just shy of his birthday.
Oh, what a shame. That's sad. That's actually quite sad. He was 53.
Yeah,
I know. I know. But that's
only 1 year away from me.
Yeah, but you know what? That is Britain growing up during wartime, 53. So
not spoiled. We say this. like the next generation down is going to look at, or maybe a few generations down is going to look at us and go, well, that's growing up in the 70s when there was leaded gas and cigarettes everywhere. And I'm like, they're not wrong.
You could smoke on airplanes when we were kids. Damn it.
Exactly. They'll say that as they, chew on a gummy to create a new kidney and other such miracles.
Doctor gave me a pill and I grew a kidney.
Yep. Oh, boy.
Reverence acknowledged.
Is that Simpsons or Star Trek 4? Which one?
That's Star Trek 4.
Okay, there we go. It's a good movie. What else? Anything else jumping in? June 11th there, this day in history.
1965, Donald Cotton commissioned to write the final 2 episodes of The Mythmakers.
And why does that speak? Just because the first 2 went down so well? Is that...
Two things. Number one,
all right.
He wrote the first 2. I mean, I guess if they didn't like it, they could have just scrapped the whole thing. But
right.
Also, I wonder where in the process they said, by the way, you know that Vicky character? Yeah, about her.
Yeah.
And was that like from the get-go or not? I don't know.
Get her out. That's what they said. I don't know where that was in the drafts of the script. I haven't paid that much attention to it, I'm afraid, but who knows?
And I suspect Warren will want to talk about that 1993 thing here.
You are absolutely right, yes. That was what I was looking at. Philip David Siegel meets with Ellen Yenta, BBC One's recently appointed controller of programs, leading to a new round of negotiations for a Doctor Who co-production deal. The endless soap opera continues.
It's amazing. We talk about this every week on this. And like, it's either like 93, or sometimes it's 90, or sometimes it's 94.
91.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
I mean, despite the fact that we all know that the fantastic documentary on the DVD is called The 7-Year Hitch, which ran 7 years between survival and the movie, but still, like, a lot of those 7 years were spent in negotiations and trial balloons and whatever.
Yeah.
I just want to further age myself after that tirade about the 70s.
Right.
This whole thing reminds me of that Cadbury ad where the devil is sitting there and the 2 guys are negotiating and they're like, I'm willing to give anything for the Cadbury secret. And the devil goes, anything, thing.
I thought about that movie.
That's what this whole situation reminds me of.
Kids, that's a commercial that aired in Canada in the early 1980s. So
seared into our brains.
You're welcome, everyone in the audience who knows what we're talking about, and we're sorry.
That Star the Robot. Those are the 2 biggies.
Man, we could just you know what? I think sometime there must be like a portion of our audience is just like mid 40s to 50s in Canada, probably in Ontario. Let's face it. They're just like, Yep, just like Leo DiCaprio.gif pointing at every reference we make to.
And conversely, there's probably a lot of people under that age going, will you just shut up? And they're not wrong at all, frankly.
They're not wrong at all. Listen,
I apologize.
You know what?
But it's going to continue.
Yeah,
so there we go.
All the 20-year-olds in the audience, you're going to have this. You're going to have this too, okay? You're going to look back and you think, oh, you remember that YouTube meme or something? Like, yeah, remember that thing on TikTok that was doing the thing? Yeah.
That already happens. That's why half of the stuff's indecipherable. Like, remember this? I'm like, no, I didn't remember it. I was old the first time.
But
what the hell are you talking about?
You'll look back at like 40 years ago. Oh, yeah, I remember. Then you'll nod. You won't even have to complete a sentence. You'll just think, you remember the thing at the TikTok? Whatever happened to TikTok? They would say.
Arguably every SpongeBob gif is that. At least it is to me, because I never watched SpongeBob because I'm 52.
Right. I don't need to watch SpongeBob.
Honestly, though, Transformers is that. And I was only a little shy of the age where you're supposed to watch. But I was old enough, I was like 14 or something, when it was at its heyday, that none of that makes any sense to me. I know where the names of 3 of them, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah. I don't. I mean, I don't need to watch SpongeBob. The gifs out of context are the perfect amount of SpongeBob that I need in my life.
They're probably better.
Yeah. What did I want to point out? 1979, Recording for Destiny of the Daleks takes place in Dorset. This might be the clay pit. This might be the rock pit. I can't remember. But what's notable about this day on location in for Destiny of the Daleks, if I'm right about the day. If it's in the clay pit, then it is the first use of a Steadicam on Doctor Who. They used an actual film Steadicam for that episode, and for them running around the quarry a little bit. It looks pretty cool. It was a very, like, I don't know, Warren, like Rocky obviously is a famous one. Bound for Glory, is that? No, there's another one around the same time, it's like Biking or something like that.
Breaking Away.
And there's like maybe 2 or 3 other movies at that time. So when you think about it in the grand context of Steadicam use, them using it for Doctor Who in 1979 is pretty early days for this. This technology.
Shining used it a ton, I think. So
that's that was Kubrick, so they probably shot that in like 73 or something like that.
Maybe
it took so long.
Also, one more thing about this particular entry: it takes place in Worth Matravers, Dorset, and I only mention this because it made me think that sounds like exactly the kind of thing the old lady in Image of the Fendal would say. Whoa, Worth Matravers! What are you talking about, you crazy old lady? Worth Matravers.
I think that's what Werther's originals were called in Wales. I think is probably what it was.
You eat enough of those, you get sugar drunk, and you say Worth Matravers.
Sugar drunk. Anyway, that's June 11th, kids. June 12th of in the year of our Lord, whatever, it doesn't matter. Let me point this out. June 12th, 1965. What might be, in my opinion, the worst episode of classic Doctor Who ever to air. Episode 4, The Chase, Journey into Terror. The one where we're in that stupid haunted house, and it's just the worst directed Doctor Who I think I've ever seen. There's a Dalek sitting there in full view of everyone 3 minutes before they actually appear on screen. They're just sitting there. He's just standing in the middle of the set, and Richard Martin just says, yep, it's good enough. They won't notice. So bad. So bad. And then at the end, Edmund Warwick comes on and he's like, he's not Doctor Who. And then they chunk in actual Doctor Who. Infiltrate and kill. And it's just like... So anyway, that's where The Chase died for me right there. It was going downhill somewhat steadily, but episode 4 is what killed it off. And even the last 2 episodes are okay, but like after that, episode 4, the worst. This day in history, June 12th, 1965. Anything else? the day of rage.
How do you follow that?
I don't know. What about Christopher H. Bidmead? 1980. Christopher H. Bidmead issues a document detailing the E-Space storyline that will run through much of season 18.
That sounds very official. Like he's got like letterhead. It's like, I have issued a document on the matter of E-Space. Please attend carefully.
Yeah. It's something though to have something a story thread going through the entire season of Doctor Who, which has never been done up to that point.
That's true.
You know.
Well, I guess Key to Time sort of was that, but
I suppose we're looking for this thing, but apart from that, it was this is an actual thing that sort of pays off later on, and so
E-Space is more that than the Key to Time is. Yeah.
So good job, Christopher Hamilton Bidmead. All right then. Well, if that's all for June 12th, the day of rage, we'll move on to June 13th. Happy birthday, Erica, my spouse, and of course, formerly the Verity podcast, has been on this show a few times, so it's her birthday on this day. What happened on her birthday that I could point to her being happy? Literally, no episode of Doctor Who aired on her actual birthday.
But a ton got recorded.
Ton was recorded. Some of which she might not even like. I don't think she thinks much of Survival. I don't know. Listen, she loves Stones of Blood, not as much as Reboss Operation. So Stones of Blood is being shot in the Stone Circle in Oxfordshire. This day in history, 1978. She was 1. The actual day of her birth, they were shooting on location in Bristol. For the Sunmakers, I think on top of that IBM building or something like that. So the very day that Erica was born, they were recording the
Is that with the wonderful line, oh my good sir, all you need is a wily accountant?
I think it might be. Yeah, that might be the one. Might be the same day that Erica's being born. So how about that?
I have a question for you. Is Erica's favorite uncommissioned storyline the Cycrons? Because in 1980, it was written or commissioned to Terence Greer.
It's funny you mention that because she has no memory of it.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
No knowledge of it whatsoever. I feel like Terence Greer is just a made-up name, actually. Like Terence Dudley and Pam Greer.
It does. Yes, Pam Greer.
Wrong spelling for Pam Greer, but
right
spelling for Judy Greer.
Yeah.
The lost Pam Greer script that we've all been pining for.
Pamela Greer just decided to just take a left turn and co-write a Doctor Who storyline.
Plenty of actors are decent enough writers. Maybe she did write a Doctor Who. I mean, I doubt it, but...
debut broadcast. Oh, listen, I talked about how Journey into Terror is probably the worst episode of Doctor Who ever made. I might count episode 6 of Inferno, which aired on June 13th, 1970, as the best. It is
okay. I was waiting. Where's this going?
It's actually good.
Sir.
It's actually really good. It's the one where basically the alternate universe ends, and like just the cliffhanger is just terrifying. It's just
fantastic.
Like there's you know what I mean? Like there's just a sense of just doom building that whole episode. Listen to that. You want to end your lives fighting like animals? Just like God, what a.
It takes skill to take something that looks cheap as hell and dumb and has green guys running around, and you still feel palpable dread for what's going on.
Yeah, it's so good. Oh, God, Season 7 is so good. It's so good. We did not deserve Season 7. In retrospect, I kind of wish we didn't have it, because it showed us what it could be. Well, you know, it's like it could be this good. And then they says,
no, it was that good.
Oh, I know. But it was never going to be that good again. Let's face it. Season 7 is
also
perfect.
The season that saved the show.
That too. That too. Yeah, I suppose we have to thank it for. Oh, why Barry Letts? Why didn't you keep on with that? Oh, it's so good. All of Season 7.
You're like every other fan. Why wasn't everything perfect all the time? I don't know, because that's not how life is.
Well, it was in 1970, Warren.
For a brief moment, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Still, probably the best season of Doctor Who all time, I think. Season 7. Anyway, happy birthday, Erica. June 14th, it's my friend Bob Sherman's birthday from school, from early childhood friend. I remember his birthday because his parents had Super Channel. We did not have Super Channel back in the day. And so I'd go over there and play Star Wars toys. And Super Channel, at the time of its launch in April of '83,
I remember this, yes,
would loop Star Wars around the clock, essentially. They had to play it a certain amount of times. And the original movie I'm talking about. And so we would play Star Wars toys, and I would play to a movie that I had never seen before. And it took me years to actually watch Star Wars front to back for the first time. I would see it in chunks whenever I go over there to play. And so there. That's what I think.
And this is where I go on kids don't know what you're missing tirade. At the time, kids, the fact that they were looping Star Wars, which we had literally had to wait 6 odd years to see on television.
Yep.
Like, this was a huge deal. Like, there was nothing else.
Yep. Well, you know what? Maybe fans of the Disney Plus series Willow will know what we're thinking about, because it came and went really quick.
Yep,
so
fair enough.
So now you're just waiting for it to show up again, and you don't have that opportunity because it's not on Disney Plus anymore. But June 14th, 1937 also was the birthday of director Michael Ferguson, one of the all-time Doctor Who great directors of 4 Stories, War Machine, Seeds of Death, Ambassadors of Death, Claws of Axos. Went on to produce and direct The Sandbaggers, amongst many other things. Died, last year, 2 years ago? I can't remember when it was now. Time is
around there, yeah.
Yeah.
2021,
October. He was just brilliant. Really great director. So anyway, anything else jumping out at you for June 14th that you want to talk about, Mitch?
Yeah. I mean, 1963, Anthony Coburn commissioned to write 100,000 BC, which will ultimately become Doctor Who's debut story.
What a day. Wow. And he did. And he wrote it.
Yeah.
And never worked for Doctor Who again. So
not for lack of trying, though, but yeah.
No. Stay tuned for the real story. Yeah.
Complete aside from last week's Timelash, a friend of mine messaged me and she said, "Yeah, where was Waris Hussein at that time? This is awful suspicious. I think you're onto something here."
Right? I know.
Then I had to explain who he was. She had no idea who Waris Hussein was, but she was like, "That does sound suspicious, though." So,
well, let me put this to you, Warren. So Anthony Coburn writes 1 episode of Doctor Who and then doesn't work for Doctor Who again. One of his future shows is a show that a whole bunch of episodes have shown up on YouTube, which is called Warship, which is set on a warship. And that series was co-created with one Ian McIntosh, who created the Sandbaggers, who disappeared in mysterious circumstances. Draw the connection, man. We're through the
coming together
glass here, man. Yeah. So the director of the first story and the writer of the first story, one of which is in Moscow right after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and another person who co-creates a show with someone who was like an MI6. Yeah. You draw your own conclusions, all right, folks?
Or don't bother.
Or no, probably not. Anything else? June 14th. There's a couple things down there, but if you want to mention
2011?
What happened in 2011 one?
Jay Hunt, the controller of programs for BBC One. There's some palace intrigue here. Not really. And that's just a Doctor Who has been renewed for a season. No, not season. Whatever that is.
Yeah.
Not 33. But advises that fewer than the usual 13 episodes will air in 2012. I immediately, even though it happened 10 odd years ago, felt the twinge of nerd. Oh God, it's going to be canceled.
That was
And
series.
it's already happened.
I know.
And yeah.
That was series 7 we're talking about, and there were what 6 episodes, I guess, with the Snowmen that autumn because the Olympics were happening. That's the thing. The BBC was all hemped up on the Olympics happening that year. You remember that moment, the last great moment in Great Britain history. That moment.
It was all downhill from there.
It really was. And so the BBC thought, you know what, we're going to go out with a bang. So let's move Doctor Who after the Olympics, and then we can focus on that there. So there. Also, 2016, the BBC announces that Matt Lucas will be reprising the role of Nardole on a regular basis during Series 10.
To this day, I am slightly deaf due to all the fan uproar and joy at the return of Matt Lucas as Nardole.
Yeah. I liked him in that. I actually
I liked him just fine, but a lot of people did not like that character.
No.
I'm not sure why. He was fine.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Did you have an opinion on
Nardole?
Nardole?
Not saying they're wrong.
Yeah, what about you, Chris? Did you have an opinion on Nardole? I can't remember how you thought about him now.
I mean, I was hesitant at the start. I don't know that they needed to bring him back, but ultimately, I found him funny and stuff. So yeah,
I don't think when you saw the stories of thinking, what are we doing here? Why is he involved in this story right now? I don't know.
Nothing beats his turn in Empress of Mars after all, right? So.
Mark Gatiss says, nope, I'm not writing him in. You just go. The TARDIS leaves, and Nardole did it, and then we carry on with the story. Then he comes in at the end.
He'd have great lines, and he'd have a couple lines that just make you cringe, and you're just like, oh, why is this here? And then he'd come back and he'd do some good stuff where he'd actually be forceful with the Doctor, and it'd be interesting. There's a lot of push and pull with this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of his non sequiturs were quite cringy. But
bit much, yeah.
If nothing else, we got a Fluid Links quote out of him that we.
That's true.
We
did.
to this day.
Immortalized forever in the Fluid Links theme. Yeah, the updated one. So there's that to thank him for. Let's move on. June 15th, momentous day in history. June 15th, 1964. Doctor Who is recorded on location for the first time. Somewhere in Buckinghamshire for the Reign of Terror. Brian Proudfoot doubling as Doctor Who, strutting his stuff throughout a meadow and stuff. That was the first element of Doctor Who location filming. Grand. Brian Proudfoot, everyone. Brian Proudfoot, who had a comedy death in The Romans. He plays Nero's official taster, and he dies after sipping it. Oh, I guess it was poisoned. Oh, well.
Wah.
Yeah. Anything else happening June 15th you wanna mention?
Chris, go ahead.
Whole bunch of scripts got a slash of red ink across the front page.
What a day. June 15th, 1966, the day of the long markers. Yeah, it's a whole bunch. Like from notable people too, like Donald Cotton and Brian Hales, who has had more scripts rejected than anyone has ever had written. David Ellis and Malcolm Hulk, who will go on to write the Faces
himself.
Yeah, George Kerr. All rejected. All in the same day.
Some of these titles are great, though. Like The Hearsay Machine, otherwise known as Twitter, and The Heavy Scent of Violence. That's all.
That sounds like what's this?
Yeah. I know. Yeah, I Hard Violence in Kent. I can't remember his name, but yeah, that great pulp thing that never happened. Hard Violence on the streets of Kent.
The herdsman of Aquarius involved the Loch Ness Monster, apparently.
Oh, really? Wow. Herdsman of Aquarius.
And
very hippie.
I love the way this is phrased. So, for the people who couldn't remember, after being submitted in April 1966, the satirical "The People Who Couldn't Remember" was rejected by story editor Jerry Davis on June 15th. Davis wanted to avoid outright comedies in the wake of the poor reception of The Gunfighters.
Wow.
Also, the people couldn't remember, could be the alternate title for the silence. But besides that, I just had this vision of them with a chalkboard, and it says herdsman of aquarium, and they just cross out the M and put an S.
The thing that Warren and I are laughing about, and we will break into hysterics if we reminisce about this too much, is the reprisalizer. And
oh, glorious!
Search out the reprisalizer, and you will laugh along with
insanely specific reference. Not even referential, referencing itself. Really, it's brilliant.
Yeah, it's really good. Anyway, that's what it sounds like.
I think this is one you've talked about before, Stephen. 1983, scheduled recording for Warriors of the Deep at BBC Television Film Studios in Ealing is cancelled due to the reallocation of facilities to cover the general election.
Yep, that is when Doctor Who died, right then and there, because they had to bump forward. I think this is what we can cancel this outright, or we can record 2 weeks early, and they chose 2 weeks early, I believe. And the Mirko wasn't ready, and sets weren't ready, and they pushed on ahead anyway. And Michael Gray took one look at this when it finally aired in January of '84. He says, "What is this crap? Why are we doing this? Let's cancel Doctor Who." All because Margaret Thatcher decides to call a snap election after the Falklands War to bake on the ratings swoon that she was going on, and so Margaret Thatcher killed Doctor Who, and it's because of that. Just stay in history. June 15th, 83.
I just have an image of some anchor getting on the set. There's a Sea Devil head on the set, and he's like, "Oh, what is this rubbish?" and just pushes it off, and then he gives you the election results.
Yeah, man. Oh boy. Here, there's some cool stuff that happened in '05 and '06 that I think is worthy of pointing out. 2005, the BBC announces that Doctor Who has been renewed for a 2006 Christmas special, along with Series 2, David Tennant's first season. So that was exciting. Also, the same day, Russell T Davies replaces another writer on the script, which became Tooth and Claw, which is a good story. And then the year after that, to the day, the BBC announces that Billie Piper will leave Doctor Who at the end of the series. Now, this is in between. I think it's right close to whenever Doomsday: Army of Ghosts played. I can't remember when that first aired, but it was around that time. Remember, they held that news back for a long time. And only dropped it once those episodes were about to happen. So we never really had a good farewell tour for Rose, which is good because it kind of built up the suspense a little bit. But it's quite some days there in the early days of modern Who, which is a long time ago, as we talk about here. Anything else in June 15th, or do you want to move on, kids?
Nah, not really.
Okay. Chris, nothing? No.
Billie Piper's departure announced.
That's what I just said.
No.
Yeah, so we'll move on then. Happy birthday, Carol Ann Ford, June 16th, 1940. Carol Ann Ford, of course, plays Susan, the first companion, and Doctor Who.
Iconic, in fact.
Very, very iconic, yeah. And I know we've already talked about this 18 times on this podcast, but June 16th, 2007, the debut broadcast on BBC One, Utopia.
Absolutely lovely. Still one of my favorites of all time.
Yeah, absolutely is. The whole episode. Well, was it the whole episode, or was it once the thing started to actually get going? He realized.
No, it's the whole episode. It's just the whole pace of it is great. The music's fantastic. It's a weird little mystery as to what the hell is going on. It's
right.
It just all works. And then the topper is the Master showing up, which is pretty great.
Yeah. I mean, the topper is Derek Jacobi becoming the Master. And then,
yes, of course.
Yeah.
But everything in it is just so... Like, the sound of drums, which I don't even mind. I know some people don't like it, but I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But it can't top this. Like, this is just such a great build-up. And it's all build-up to that big moment. It's fantastic.
Well, but then I like how it takes a moment to breathe. Remember that Jack and the Doctor finally had the conversation in between. It's just like, it was such a good direction. Graham Harper directed that, and it's just like, man, Yeah, that's gonna be coming up in a few days now that I'm into Modern Who on my pilgrimage. So I'm looking forward to watching that one again. I tell you, it's been a while since I've seen that one.
One of the things I love watching it after, like when I went on my Modern pilgrimage a while back, was that the next episode you get the Gallifrey theme, but it's actually seeded into bits and pieces of this. Like whenever they're talking with, between the Doctor and Yana, there's like sort of jaunty versions of the Gallifrey theme, but you don't know that until the next episode, which is kind of great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. Heady times, exciting times for Doctor Who back in those days. Not that they ever went away, but first time we see the Master coming back and hearing the clips of Delgado in a play in there, just
that was so great.
Mm-hmm. Really good. All right, one last day for this week here in the Timelash. June 17th, John Pertwee, 1969, is introduced to the press as the third Doctor 4 days before Patrick Troughton leaves at the end of the War Games Part 10 rather. So how about that? Just sort of introduce the press, like, here he is. He's a new Doctor. You won't see him. You will not see him in this coming week, but he'll be the new Doctor. Trust me on this.
I mean, is that really all that different from that thing where we had Matt Smith show up and we're like, who the hell is this guy?
I suppose not, yeah. But, usually we find out, nowadays we find out who the Doctor is weeks or months or a year in advance of their actual, the end of the era that they're talking about. But, 4 days left in the Troughton era and we cast our new Doctor. They shot the regeneration scene basically without knowing who's the next Doctor to be. So, also, happy birthday! Born on the exact same day, June 17th, 1982. Arthur Darvill and Jodie Whittaker, both born same day.
Also, too young. That's entirely too young.
They're 41, Warren. They're 41.
I know, still entirely too young.
Yeah, they're both 41. So there you go. And I'll tell you what, let's wrap this up on 2006 debut broadcast of Love and Monsters on BBC One.
Much derided and unfairly so.
And Warren gets his ELO fix.
That's
and
true.
Not just me. Stephen did too.
Yeah, I did too. I never heard of Mr. Blue Sky before. What a great little scene that was. Remember, everyone was dreading that because they go, "Oh, this looks bad." There's a Blue Peter monster in it. The Doctor and Rose are barely in it. Tachyon TV decided to do a live commentary of it on first watch, thinking that it would be terrible. And as the episode went on, they realized actually this is really, really good.
I mean, it's got its bits and pieces of bad jokes and all the rest of it, but which people go on about ad infinitum. But and not just that one Blue Sky part. I don't remember you probably know the name of the song, but where he's kind of the slow mo reminiscence of being with his mom and that ending of that other. Maybe it is Blue Sky.
That's all part of Mr. Blue Sky. Song. That's all the same.
That is great. It's all so well used. And just the speech at the end is fantastic. It's so good.
It's a really good episode. Really good episode. Yeah. Love and Monsters. The first proper Dr. Light episode too. So without that, we couldn't have had Blink or Midnight or the other ones that I can't think of right now.
Those other ones.
Those ones, yeah. Anyway, we've been here for quite a long time in your earballs there, everyone. So we'll rock it off into the future. We'll talk about some Doctor Who next week. How about why don't you join us for that? I recorded it at a different time than close to midnight Mountain Time as we're doing it right now. So until next week, then, everyone, I am Stephen in Edmonton.
Warren in Vancouver.
And Chris in Edmonton.
So long for now.
You've been listening to Radio Free Skaro. Find us online at radiofreeskaro.com. Follow us on Twitter and Tumblr at Radio Free Skaro. Subscribe to us on iTunes and donate to the show at patreon.com/Radio Free Skaro. Thank you.